So let's take a closer look at the do's and don'ts of proper pacing. You've just spent 12 to 16 weeks preparing for your first marathon, and maybe you don't quite know what's the right pace to run. How do you figure it out, Coach?
Well, the important part of proper pacing, one is understanding what's the distance that you're training for. So if you've been training 12, 16 weeks for a marathon, you got to understand what's that been. And then the second part of it, you got to trust the training. So you got to understand that side of it, Like, for example, your first marathon, you had never done one. So you've just trained 12 to 16 weeks at what was, for you, kind of theoretical pace for the marathon, but it's all just guesswork for you at that time because you'd never completed one. So we'll go back and try to look at the science table side of it and just look at, all right, well, the marathon pace work you've done in training was X. Let's say it was 5-minute pace per mile. Or for you getting ready for London, we estimated about 4:52 pace per mile. But I know going out and saying, 4:52 pace when you're doing training is great, but all of a sudden game day shows up 26 miles. So I think it's like you got to trust the training and understand that's going to take you where you want to be and not start second guessing it in those last couple days before the race.
Yeah, and then what you want to make sure you don't do too is go out and say, I have to run this pace no matter what, and then all of a sudden you hit a windy day or the course is more challenging than you thought and you're stressed out because you're running, you're looking at your splits and it's not as fast as you want, right? So you got to be flexible, right?
Oh, without a doubt. Proper pacing, there are a lot of variables involved. We've got adrenaline surges, we've got heat and humidity, we've got headwinds, we've got rain and snow. All of these different factors could play into it depending on where you're racing. So you've got to come in with a flexible mind, I think the most important thing to think of is this is a process of what we're trying to get through. So I always teach, when we're doing a marathon, run that first 20 miles with your head, run that last 10K with your heart. Use your head and understand that side of it to get you to where you need to be. Therefore, you can dig in with the guts on the second half.
Yeah. And so what about those times when you mess up, you go out a little bit too hard, come through halfway too fast? How do you adjust from there? What do you do?
Again, I think we got to go back to process. It's about thinking on your feet. You go out too hard. It's like, that's fine. You didn't ruin the race. Let's just adjust. Let's settle it back in, get into the nice rhythm of the pace, and feel good. You haven't ruined the race if you go out too hard for the first couple miles, as long as you come back and settle in and say, all right, I'm going to be fine. I think where people make mistakes is think whatever they do in that very beginning ruins the whole big picture.
Yeah, I know for me too is to not let other people affect what I'm going to do out in the race in terms of media or a friend, if they're like, you're going to go out that fast, that's way too fast. Like I remember last year in London, we were going to go out in 62:30, and a reporter asked me, he said, no American's ever gone out in a marathon in 62:30, what are you thinking? And I was kind of like, what am I thinking, And I was kind of like taken aback by that. I think you got to just, take confidence from your training that, hey, I've prepared for this. I'm not trying to do anything that I haven't done in practice, so now I'm just going to go out and execute.
Yeah, without a doubt. I think what we've seen in a lot of marathons, you'll get, the everyday runner, the guy who qualified to Boston is so excited. He's done that great job, and he's done his training for 3:15 pace, let's say, and then, hey, his friend calls him up the night before, hey, I came into Boston, I'm running. He's going to run 3 hours, right? He's like, I'll run with you. So all of a sudden he just kind of threw that whole thing in the trash. He's crashing and burning on Heartbreak Hill. Not a good decision, Stick with the game plan and don't change it late.
Yeah, so run your own race, run your own pace.